Good evening and welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly. I'm Gabrielle Weiniger, filling in for Aaron Porras to discuss all the latest diplomatic and political developments from across the region. We're joined in studio by ruling Likud Party MP and Israeli Parliament member candidate Naftali Ben-Simon and Dr. Shaul Sherman, founder and director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Coming up this evening, movements in the diplomatic arena as Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas meets his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Sochi, just ahead of a scheduled visit to the Holy Land by the US President Donald Trump. And Lebanon's Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah says that any future conflict between his Shiite group and Israel could take place inside Israeli territory. But first, to our top story this week. Jordan and Israel trade barbs over the killing of an attacker after police release dramatic footage showing the stabbing of an Israeli police officer by a Jordanian citizen. Could this mark a turn for the worst in diplomatic relations between the two countries? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's bureau has called out the Jordanian Minister for Media Affairs, Mohammed Momani, after he issued a statement calling the death of 57-year-old alleged attacker Mohammed al-Skaji a, quote, heinous crime, and holding Israel responsible. The death of the Jordanian tourist who was shot dead after he stabbed an Israeli police officer has sparked a war of words between the two countries. Israel calling the Jordanian minister's statement, quote, outrageous at having expressed support for a terror attack. The details here from the Israeli police.
סמוך לשעה 2 צהריים, לאחר תפילת צהריים בהר הבית, יוצא מחבל לאחר התפילה, עולה ברחוב השלשלת ומזהה שוטר של המרחב אחרי סיום משמרת, חוזר חזרה ותוקף אותו חזיתית. הוא שולף סכין ומצליח לדקור אותו מספר דקירות, גם בצוואר, גם בפנים וגם בגוף. מדובר במחבל מבוגר בשנות יליד 60. אנחנו יודעים כרגע לומר שהוא תושב ירדן. אנחנו יודעים לומר שהוא נכנס בימים האחרונים לירושלים. אנחנו כמובן נבדוק את כל השהות שלו כאן, את כל המהלך שלו בירושלים, אולי בסביבותיה ואולי בעיר העתיקה, על מנת לבדוק את כל מה שקרה עד לרגע הפיגוע.
Mr. Ben-Simon, Dr. Sherman, Israel and the Palestinian territories have witnessed a series of sporadic stabbing, car ramming and shooting attacks since October 2015. Those street attacks have slowed down recently. Is this latest attack a hint that perhaps we're going to have a very hot summer ahead?
Well, I hope not. I hope not. We can see by the statistics that the stabbing attacks are decreasing dramatically. Jerusalem is sure for everyone, Christian, Muslims and Jews, of course. And we can see the presence of police there every day, every night. And of course, from time to time, we have incidents like the last one from the Jordanian tourist. We can call it the Jerusalem syndrome. Some people who come to Jerusalem and try to save the world and to do something dramatic. It cannot work. The police act very quickly, and I'm very disappointed from the Jordanian reaction. It was a clear cut. It was so obvious that he started stabbing policemen. So I really don't understand. Even with the political differences, I don't understand. I'm very disappointed from the Jordanian reaction.
But it is unusual to see such attacks from Jordanian citizens. What would be the motivation, do you think, Dr. Sherman, behind the stabbing attack?
Well, I've always been a Jordan skeptic, and I've never really been convinced by the claim that Jordan is a potential long-term strategic ally. And if you look at the Jordanian reaction to it, I think this reflects a wider syndrome. If you look back, remember not only was Jordan in 1967 a willing participant in the war of annihilation, or the attempted war of annihilation against Israel.
In 1948 you're referring to?
No, 1967. 1967. We forget that King Hussein allied himself with Saddam Hussein in the 1990 in the Kuwait invasion. And recently we just saw how the murderer of 7 Israeli schoolgirls was welcomed in the Jordanian public as a hero. So, I'm very skeptical about the Jordanian response or Jordanian attitude to Israel, and things are probably getting worse there because, as you know, Jordan is inundated by huge waves of refugees from Syria and elsewhere, and you have to be very naive to think that they aren't being infiltrated by extremists who will radicalize them and endanger the regime. And so I think Israel's working assumption must be, even though we may prefer the current regime on any foreseeable alternatives, but the working assumption must be that we have to plan for a regime change and not a good one.
Well, I would like to add something. I don't want to be so pessimistic about Israeli-Jordanian relationship. Still, there is a kind of peace, coexistence peace between the two countries.
Even if it's a cold one, perhaps?
Even if it's a cold one, when you have a direct flight between Amman and Tel Aviv, it's a very important sign. When you have some economic businessmen in Jordan now, it's also a very positive sign. Of course, Jordan is in a very, very, very geopolitical, complex situation, and the reaction maybe come from this prism of we are part of the Arab world, and we will not say anything good about Israel. But behind the scene, I think Israel-Jordan relationship in all terms are much better than any other Arab country.
And they do have a special interest as well in the old city.
That might be true, that the regime has a vested interest in Israel looking out for them. But I would be very wary about taking things like flights and business connections as too great an indication of the strength of the relationship. If you think back to Iran, for instance. Iran, there were much stronger relations. They had a lot of flights there every week, and Soleil Bonnet was building there. And within almost an instant, a regime change brought about a dramatic change in the attitude towards Israel. From being one of Israel's closest allies, it became one of Israel's fiercest enemies. And I wouldn't downplay the importance of public sentiment in Jordan.
It's not the same case, Martin. It's not the same case. Iran and Jordan, nothing to compare between.
That's what they said about Iran before the Shah fell.
Yeah, but no, the scale, the population, the army, the superpower as Iran used to be one, and Jordan is nothing to compare.
Well, that may be true, but I would just say I wouldn't put too much faith in the person-to-person relationship between Israeli and Jordanians, because you saw the same thing in Turkey, and we don't know what's going to happen with Turkey. I'm very pessimistic about the future of our relations with Turkey.
Yeah.
But I think the Iranian issue is something that really has to be instructive, because it makes no difference how firm and warm the relations are at the regime level. If the regime changes, what you see is an outburst of enmity and hatred towards Israel from the street up. Yeah. And that's something I don't think...
Last comment, Dr. Mr. Ben-Shimon, do you have a comment?
Well, Jordan faces a huge challenge.
I agree.
Refugees,
sure.
Daesh, all kind of surprises from Lebanon and Syria and Iraq came to Jordan.
Do you see a regime change like Dr. Sherman is saying?
And still, I think Jordan and Israel they have the same goal and the same strategic and diplomatic and security. And the incident last week in Jerusalem, it was a rare accident, and I think we should go further and to close the case and not to
and we'll close this conversation
and not to declare
well.
another crisis between Israel and Jordan.
Thank you. From events on the ground to the diplomatic arena, where Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas in the southern Russian resort of Sochi this week. Top officials praised the two countries' solid bilateral relations as they opened up a new cultural centre in the West Bank city of Bethlehem via video link. But is there more to this cultural exchange than meets the eye? The meeting comes as US President Donald Trump's administration has pledged to express support for Palestinian self-determination during his trip to the region this month, suggesting Trump may indeed be open to a two-state solution, a solution he has so far declined to publicly embrace.
With President Rivlin and Prime Minister Netanyahu, he will reaffirm America's unshakable bond to the Jewish state. With President Abbas, he will express his desire for dignity and self-determination for the Palestinians. And to leaders and peoples alike across the entire trip, he will demonstrate his hopes for just and lasting peace.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فخامة الرئيس الصديق فلاديمير بوتين، بداية أتقدم بالشكر الجزيل والتقدير العالي لفخامتكم ولحكومة وشعب روسيا الصديق على مواقف الدعم المتواصل الذي تقدمونه للشعب الفلسطيني وقضيته العادلة.
Открытие комплекса – это заметная веха в развитии взаимовыгодных отношений между Россией и Палестиной, но и свидетельство в то же время подлинно крепкой дружбы между нашими народами и между нашими странами.
Dr. Sherman, aside from this cultural centre they set up in Bethlehem, what's perhaps behind this meeting, do you think?
Well, you know, when you introduced the peace previously, you mentioned or you referred to Putin and Abbas as counterparts. Well, I think it's very difficult to imagine a greater difference in the political stature between any two people.
I mean, he is the president of the Palestinian Authority.
Well,
it's a title.
Well, no, my point is that Putin is so well entrenched in his country and so well supported. And Abbas is in his 12th year of his 4-year tenure with about 60% of the population calling for his replacement. So I think...
And he poured very fairly in the local municipal elections this week as well.
And so it's very interesting to see this huge difference between two leaders of completely different political stature coming together.
Why do you think they came together then in that
well,
case?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you know, because I don't understand why world leaders are meeting with Abbas anyway, because how can Abbas make any lasting commitments or obligations? How can he take them on? You know, I think that I would be surprised if any significant developments arise from this meeting, although I think we could see it against the background of Russia trying to reassert itself in the Middle East, and Abbas perhaps put off a little bit by Trump's strident pro-Israel stance, trying to diversify his risks. So, but I would be surprised if anything really substantive comes out. It's certainly in the near and immediate term.
There was a rumour that there'd be a Russian proposal for a trilateral meeting in Moscow that would include Putin, Abbas and Netanyahu. What do you make of that, Mr. Ben-Simon?
Well, I agree with Dr. Sherman that no significant achievement will come out from this meeting, but it was a very good week, a diplomatic week for Abu Mazen. He was in Washington, received by President Trump. He's in Sochi, in a very nice place in Russia, and he's with the President Putin. And for them, it's the beginning of maybe a political movement or acceleration of something that is stuck for many years. And but still, the biggest tragedy of Mr. Abbas and the Palestinian Authority is that they are very strong in visits and are very weak on the ground, because I'm okay to discuss any political solution about two states for two people, but where are the two states? In Gaza, in the West Bank, in Israel? What are, with whom we will negotiate? I want to see as a first step, as a significant step, I would like to see Mr. President Abbas is going to Gaza and declaring the negotiation with Israel for two-state solution from Gaza. Until then, it's just diplomatic talks. Nothing will come out from it. But it's nice to travel, it's nice to show to the world that the Palestinian cause is still on the ground. But we were in this movie many times ago, so I'm not so optimistic about that. Maybe the Trump visit next week will change something. Well, I hope so.
Dr. Sherman, do you agree with that Abbas doesn't really represent the Palestinian people?
Well, I think that's obvious. I mean, he certainly doesn't represent anyone in Gaza. He cannot hold elections without, because he's almost certain to lose. So I don't think he represents the Palestinians, not because I think so, I think because the facts on the ground say so. But as opposed to Mr. Ben-Simon, I'm very opposed to a two-state solution, and I can't understand why anyone would even want to advance that idea, Because why would you want to advance the establishment of yet another homophobic, misogynistic, Muslim-majority tyranny whose hallmarks would be gender discrimination, persecution of gays, the harassment of political rivals, and the oppression of non-Muslim faiths? Why would anyone expect anything good to come out of that idea? And why did anyone expect the Palestinian state not to be precisely the way that I described it?
I emphasize, and I would like to make it very clear. For me, the independent Palestinian state is in Gaza. This is my test case for the international arena to be recognized as the independent Palestinian state in Gaza. Because Gaza can be a good start for something, for kind of normalization between
But there's
Israel,
no recognized
Palestinians,
government there.
Well,
but in Gaza, as you know, you have Hamas, and Hamas don't recognize neither Israel or Abu Mazen.
So really you have no faith then in this Abbas, Netanyahu, Trump?
Meetings are okay. It's because I always believe in negotiation and in dialogue, always, in any kind. But to think that from a week from now or a year from now we will create a Palestinian state, this is a total illusion. It will never happen if it's not in Gaza, period.
Let's see what happens when Trump visits the region next week. Now to our third and final headline for tonight. The chief of Lebanese militia group Hezbollah warned this week that any future war between the Shiite militants and Israel could take place within Israel's territory. In a speech televised live, Syed Hassan Nasrallah didn't say the conflict with Israel was imminent, but he has threatened to fire rockets inside Israel before. He also addressed another arena where tensions have been ramping up, Syria. Take a listen to that speech before we break it down from there.
أن العدو الإسرائيلي خائف وقلق من أي مواجهة مقبلة، لأنه بدي أحكي شوي عن هالنقطة. من أي مواجهة مقبلة، هو يعلم أن أي مواجهة مقبلة قد تكون في داخل الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة. لن يكون هناك مكان بمنأى لا عن صواريخ المقاومة ولا عن أقدام المقاومين. أنا أقول لكم لأنه في بعض الناس بيعيشوا على الأوهام وعلى الخيالات وعلى التمنيات. حلفاء سوريا في سوريا يعني روسيا وإيران وبقية الحلفاء في هذه المرحلة سياسيا وعسكريا وأمنيا وميدانيا أكثر انسجاما وتفاهما من أي وقت مضى.
You know what is so sad about that? I'm always, when I see an Arab leader wants to improve his rating from his internal affairs, let's talk about the Jews. Let's talk about Israel. Let's threat Israel.
So you're saying this is a war rhetoric and not really a threat?
Of course, he's in a deep situation, very problematic in Syria. And we have to remember more than 2,000 Hezbollah soldiers killed in Syria in the last 5 years. And so many of them, many more are wounded. And the economic situation of Hezbollah is very bad because the Iran regime is not putting the amount of money that used to put before. Yes, they have the missiles. Yes, they are occupying Lebanon. Yes, they have still the capability to harm Israel, but this is not the case. This is not the timing. And I know he's the last one who believed what he said.
Would you agree with that this is rhetoric and not a direct threat at Israel?
Well, I don't know if it's an immediate threat, but I think we should take Nasrallah very seriously. And by the way, this conveys just how badly the 2006 war in Lebanon was conducted, because from a situation where they had 40,000 rockets facing Israel, they now have almost 10 times that amount facing Israel. And I have no doubt that if war does break out, they will certainly have some kind of effort to bring the fighting towards Israel. I don't know what the truth is about them being tunneling into Israel, but I certainly would not discard that lightly. So I think that we should take it very seriously. I know that the IDF is taking Hezbollah very seriously, but just as a side, it just shows something about the bizarre nature of Israeli politics, because the people responsible for allowing South Lebanon to become such a huge Hezbollah arsenal are still in the forefront of Israeli politics, like Tzipi Livni, Amir Peres, people who, after such a colossal failure, should have been moved out to the very dark margins of Israeli public life.
Yeah, we don't have to forget that he's still talking from his bunker. The leader of the Hezbollah is not going out for 5 years or since 2006 because he knows he's a prime target. And about Lebanon, I'm sure that they have the capability to harm Israel. I also sure that we have the ability to change the situation, not like in 2006 that we made some like PlayStation war from the air. It's a different scenario with a different threat, which means no more Lebanon, no more the existence of Lebanon as a state.
Gentlemen,
so they know that.
I want to take you back to something that you said, Dr. Sherman, about the security of Israel's borders. Russia, Iran and Turkey are talking about so-called safe zones in Syria. What do you think about that, where aircraft are not going to attack? How will that affect Israel, and is this something that's good for Israel's security or not?
Well, I certainly think that the safe zones for Syrian civilians is probably a good idea, but the point for Israel is, which ties into what we talked about earlier about Abbas's meeting with Putin. There are a lot of unknowns about what Russian designs are in Syria, and we could find a situation where, under Iranian auspices with Russian backing, Hezbollah could deploy on the Golan.
Hezbollah and Iranian troops as well.
Well, we know that there have been Iranian casualties in the Golan as well. So I think Israel has to watch this very, very carefully, and perhaps we should hope for the best, as Mr. Ben Simon says, but we certainly should prepare for the worst.
Yes, and in the situation in Syria and concerning Lebanon and the northern border of Israel, I think Russia knows very good that what are the limit of the Iran and Syria and trying to attacking Israel or even spending some weapons to Hezbollah. Russia is playing a very important role in Syria, not because they want to keep Bashar al-Assad. They know that he's part of the problem, but under Obama administration a few years ago or 1 year ago, they wanted to show United States who is the key player. Now with Trump, maybe the situation will improve, will change, and Bashar al-Assad will not be a part of the game, of the political game, and it will inflict Iran and maybe Lebanon. So things are dramatic, things can change. We have to wait and see, and I can assure you that the northern border in Israel is like Toscana in Italy.
Quickly, gentlemen, a final response from you, Dr. Sherman.
Well, I think the Russians have a longer-term aim in Syria, not necessarily Assad, but they certainly have a strategic aim in keeping their naval presence there and a military presence in this area. So I don't think it's only an issue of Assad, certainly not. But as I say, the implications could be quite ominous for Israel if we have Hezbollah coming to deposit.
A dangerous situation for Israel, possibly. Thank you, Dr. Sherman. That wraps up this edition of ILTV Weekly. Thank you to our guests, Likud Party member Naftali Ben-Simon and Dr. Martin Sherman of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again, same time, same region next week, only on ILTV Weekly. From me and the team here in Tel Aviv, good night.